Okay, now on to introducing our speakers. Andrew Chan writes regularly about music, film, and books. His work has been published by the Criterion Collection, Film Comment, NPR, The New Yorker, and Reverse Shot. Brittany Spanos is a senior writer at Rolling Stone with a focus on pop music and internet culture. Since starting at Rolling Stone in 2015, she has written cover stories on Harry Styles, Adele, Cardi B, and many more stars. Prior to taking on her role at Rolling Stone, Spanos worked as club's editor at Village Voice, handling concert listings for the paper while contributing interviews and reviews to its music blog on both local, emerging artists, as well as established stars. As a freelancer, Spanos' work was featured in Vulture, Spin, Pitchfork, Cosmo, and Rookie Mag. She's presented at the annual Pop Conference and served on its 2021 programming committee. She has been teaching a class on Taylor Swift at NYU's Clive Davis School of Recorded Music since spring 2022. And in her spare time, she dreams of a One Direction reunion.
Yeah.
Join me in welcoming Andrew to
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm so touched to see everyone here. As some of you may know, this is the last stop on the book tour, and I just have to say that it's been incredible talking with people about Mariah's work, both fans and non-fans. It's kind of been a powerful demonstration to me, not to be corny, but of the power of music. And so I'm just cherishing these last moments of the tour, and I'm grateful that I'm able to be here with you all. First, I want to thank Asian American Writers Workshop for having me tonight. This is a really important space. I've seen some incredible writers here over the years, and they do incredible work in the community. So it's an honor to be here. I want to thank You and Me Books back there. And I want to thank Brittany Spanos, who is really one of my favorite writers on pop music right now. It's such a pleasure to be in conversation with her tonight, and I look forward to getting into our talk. Before that, I wanted to read a little bit from the book just to give you a sense of how I listen to Mariah and how I think about her. Typically, in the earlier dates on the book tour, I was reading from the very beginning of the book, which would seem to make sense, but I'm a little bored of that now. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read from the very end, which I hope it doesn't, I don't think it will spoil anything for you, but I think this passage, which is like the very last 2 pages, encapsulates the main subject of the book, which is singing and the voice. So I'm just going to read a little bit. The immateriality of the voice makes it akin to the spirit. In fact, Aristotle defined voice as the sound produced by a creature possessing a soul. For most of its presence on Earth, the voice has been a casualty of history, mortal and undocumented. It's without mass, it weighs nothing. It's a mystery that, ooh, my friend's baby. It's a mystery that comes from inside the body, reliant on the coordination of several different muscles and organs carried out on a current of air before dissipating without a trace. Our identities are wrapped around it, and race, gender, class, and sexual orientation are often inferred from it. But the voice evades tidy classification because no individual voice sounds exactly like another. Because the voice seems not entirely of this world, untouchable and unplaceable, it can slip between the cracks and penetrate the deepest recesses of ourselves. Is it any wonder that so much sacred ritual across religions and cultures hinges on vocalization, or that the Bible is filled with mentions of the voice and the Lord's persistent requests for us to make joyful use of it? The voice's uncanny power can become domesticated through the ubiquity of pop music, but Mariah's extreme style foregrounds the way singing can activate something irrational and untamed within us. The improbable regions of her instrument are no less berserk than the most haunting human sounds in the history of recorded music. Screamin' Jay Hawkins's gothic growl, Tom Waits's froggy drawl, Jimmy Scott's androgynous warble, Joanna Newsom's high-pitched squawk. This is singing that seems piped in from another universe, singing that can bring you to your knees. Even if we were to stop short of leaping into the divine, we might at least try to understand why singers like Mariah are spoken about in such mystical terms. I gave up on religion long ago, but her voice seems to scratch some spiritual itch I still feel inside me, one that I assume will never go away. I'm fascinated by the visceral ways in which people who love virtuosic singing, especially fans of lavishly expressive styles such as R&B, gospel, and opera, react to it as if in the throes of possession. Some of us feel jolts of pleasure that researchers have called skin orgasms, psychophysiological reactions, partially explained by scientific studies that liken the neurological effect of music to that of sex and drugs. Some of us respond with gestures of ecstasy, closing our eyes, trembling and shuddering, scrunching up our faces, holding our hands up as if to catch the sound in midair. I believe it's possible for a listener to identify so intensely with the singer that he feels her voice vibrating in his throat. A few times I've dreamed of Mariah's voice coming out of my mouth, dreamed of bending sound to my will like she does, and have woken up in a state of rapture. Time passes and I still experience Mariah's singing as an ever-renewing shock to the system. For me, her voice embodies not just a manner of singing, but an ethos. She's one of pop's reigning transcendentalists. Like the diva geniuses in whose footsteps she follows, she's serious in her belief that her voice, can put us in communion with the sublime. I wanted to play, before I get into the talk, I wanted to play 2 minutes of a song, and I know that's kind of long to be sitting here listening to 2 minutes, but I figured since you're at an event about Mariah, that you won't mind. But it is the end of Anytime You Need a Friend, which is a song that many of you will know, from 1993. And I will say, just as by way of setting this up, earlier in the tour, when I was choosing clips to present to people in the book talks, I would sort of emphasize the songs that I thought would bring out a dimension that people didn't necessarily know. If you were a general listener, you wouldn't necessarily know about Mariah, such as the hip hop stuff or her house remixes. But this is just a big old ballad from the early 90s, and it's earnest, it's sincere, it's a beautiful song about love and devotion that has only begun to mean more to me as I get older. And my friend who I dedicated this book to, Goen, is in the audience, and she's looking at me with a smile. And this song is for you and my other friends in the audience. And I want to, so just to finish my setup, I want you to sort of think about, it's a lot of vocals in this 2 minutes. So hold on to your wigs. But I just want you to sort of think about how her voice enacts the resourcefulness and the creativity and the stamina that is required in loving people through hard times. So let's go and let's play it loud. So, did y'all like that? Welcome, Brittany Spanos.
I feel like she comes to a stage more when Mariah's playing.
I know.
I don't want to enter a room where anywhere without a little Mariah.
I know. And I realized that was an intense way of starting. But yeah, we just had to go there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being
so
here.
happy to be here. I love the book.
Thank you.
If you haven't read it yet, I'm sure many of you have had a chance. There's many friends of Andrew in here, but if you have not read it, you're gonna really love it. And I wanted to talk about what it's been like since the book came out, and the Lambs are a very intense.
Oh yeah.
Holds many intense fandoms. I mean, tell me about the reaction from people to the book.
I've been blown away. This is my first book. I never really had an intention or like a fully formed idea that I wanted to write a book. I come from the essay form. I've been writing criticism in essay form for years, and I like that form. I like 1,000, 2,000 words. Like that's my comfort zone. And during pandemic, I just kind of was bored and needed a project, but I had no sense of who the audience was going to be. And it did dawn on me as I was finishing the book up that, oh my God, the Lambs are going to read this. They're going to be angry at me for something I've said or something I've missed or some opinion I've had. And overall, I've been blown away because people have reached out to me from different countries, Chile, Australia, shout out to you if you're watching, China, it's kind of wild, and all of them kind of echoing the same sentiment that we've been waiting for this, which brings me back to the original feeling that I had when I started writing the book, which was that I've wanted to read something like this myself, and I kind of had wished that someone else had written it. I think music criticism at its best can put us in touch with that feeling of first experiencing a work of art or music, healing away the years and the layers of familiarity that can come after listening so many years to the same body of work, and peeling away celebrity, peeling away all of the preconceived notions that are imposed on artists, and just bring us back to the relationship of sound and ear, and heart. So it seems like people have been appreciative, and it's crazy, but also I realized that subconsciously I had a separate intention, which wasn't just talking only to the Lambs. It was also to talk to people who love music but maybe don't know Mariah that well, friends of mine, very close friends or family of mine who don't know Mariah like that. And I wanted to use her music as a way of conveying something about my inner life, because she's so integral to the emotional landscape that I grew up in, the way I cope with difficulties in life, the way I celebrate. And that has been really moving too, to get feedback from friends of mine who know nothing about Mariah, and said that the book sort of helped them understand not just her, but me. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a soulful kind of charting of Mariah's career, but obviously it's so intertwined with your own identity, with who you are as a fan of her. I mean, that perspective of loving her for most of your life, and that how she's kind of been on this journey with you to this moment of having this book. It's like, tell me about the experience of reflecting on your own fandom of her, and how did writing the book and putting that and verbalizing that in a way that you may not have done, I mean, obviously at this length you hadn't done before. Tell me how that changed if that did change your fandom in any way.
Well, I was almost worried that I didn't start out in music criticism feeling like, oh, I want to write about Mariah or some of my other favorites. You know, there is a degree of distance. I think criticism requires a judgment of distance between you and the object and the artist. And Mariah is so close to my heart that I didn't know if I wanted any distance. But this really did, as much as I struggled to not write anything personal in the book, that was definitely kind of a conflict in my mind. I realized that in a way, writing, even though this is predominantly criticism, it is a bit memoir as well. Even in the passages where it's purely close listening, I'm sort of charting the history of my development as a listener. And Mariah has been, from the very beginning, a kind of gateway artist for me. So it's not even just fandom of her, it is my love of music. She's the door through which I walked to get to Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, Chaka Khan, Donny Hathaway, Judy Garland, you know, all the great singers that I love so much, Ella Fitzgerald. She brought me into my love of singing, really, and singers. I thought in writing the book, I worried that I would just be sick of the music. But there is a certain magic in revisiting music that you know backwards and forwards. I think a lot of criticism is focused on the new, but there is a kind of unique relationship that you develop with the set of songs and the set of voices that you've listened to for decades, where you know every inflection. Like I was just playing the clip from Anytime You Need a Friend. I know every run, I know the backgrounds, I know I know every drum moment, and it brings you back to, I mean, it's corny, but it brings you back to moments in your life where you needed that music. And where listening to music can almost feel like life or death, you know? So it was kind of intense, but then the writing of it becomes difficult because you're sort of trying to contain your own personal intense feelings for the subject matter and make it something that is useful to a reader.
Is there a song or an album that in your own sort of arbitrary kind of ranking of favorite Mariah songs and albums that maybe changed in your opinion while you were writing it? Like maybe today there's a song that like maybe a song you didn't really like so much before, and now you're like, oh my God, like what did I unlock with this? Or an album that you were like, wow, this may be my favorite.
Well, my favorite will always be Butterfly, her 1997 album, which she considers her masterpiece, and I believe it is. But you're talking about over 30 years of music, and there was stuff that I had kind of discounted. You know, even in my introduction of Anytime You Need a Friend, I was talking about it's cooler to say you became a fan of Mariah because she was hip hop. You know, it was cooler to like her when she was fully and kind of incontrovertibly an R&B urban artist. But there was, you know, half a decade or more of her career where she was adult contemporary pop, ballads, and she was considered corny and cheesy and sentimental. And that's what people kind of remember who grew up with her during her debut and have a certain impression solidified of her from that time. And a lot of that early stuff I kind of had thought, oh, this is formulaic. You know, I think she really came into her own as an artist in the mid-50s. And then I would go back and listen to stuff she had written with her collaborator, Walter Afanasieff, who was really kind of the main collaborator behind all these big ballads, including Anytime You Need a Friend. And I was just thinking, this stuff is brilliant. My ears were a little biased against that side of her career because it still had the just layers of uncool on it. But hearing it in the totality of the career, I've fallen in love with a lot of those ballads that people would consider corny. Yeah.
And there's a really great bit of your own process of writing a book and researching for the book, where you talk about how you made all these playlists of songs that sort of preceded Mariah and may have built sort of what the canon was at that time and what sort of built to Mariah. And I'm curious, because that was feeding into a very specific way of writing about artists that you love and who you have lived with for 30 years and have kind of had part of your life. But how has doing something like that, but also doing this sort of like close listening of Mariah changed the way that you listen to music or think about music and pop music?
Yeah, I love this question. I actually just came back from DC where I had an event, and my conversation partner is a really good friend of mine who's a classical musician, and we were talking about Ravel and Debussy in relation to Mariah, and I was telling her, and she understood. Listening to Mariah has seeped in, the influence of that has seeped into so much of my listening across genres, across eras, periods, so that when I listen to like the classical impressionists like Ravel, I can hear the level of sonic detail and the creation of sonic beauty and pleasure is really quite aligned with what Mariah does, especially not so much in the Anytime You Need a Friend, but in later works like the Butterfly era, where she's stacking her vocals dozens of times and creating this wall of sound with different tones in her voice, is not dissimilar to how Ravel or Debussy would create that through an orchestra. Listening to Mariah's melisma makes me think of Indian classical music, which I'm not an expert in, or even Arabic chanting and singing, that just the way the voice can move and almost defy gravity, and how a scale can how you can be so free with a scale that it's almost like your voice can go anywhere within it. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
yeah.
but it's I think when people hear that you're writing a book on Mariah or have written a book on Mariah, I think they assume something or about Mariah fans. But I think what I wanted to do was kind of restore the strangeness to the music in a way. As I said in that passage, the uncanniness and weirdness of the voice can become domesticated through the ubiquity of pop music. And I wanted to get back to that moment where it's just like pure astonishment. And I think sometimes that is what brought me to writing music criticism, was to get back to that encounter, the original encounter.
Yeah, assumptions is something that I found to be such a great thread of how you talked about Mariah as a person, as an icon, as a public figure, as a musician, but also yourself and your own listening and your engagement with her as a fan. And obviously the thread with Mariah is so much of how people perceived her as white passing and not being a Black artist making Black music. The assumption that to be a great singer is not as important as being a great writer is more important than being a great singer, that kind of stuff. But the idea of being a fan of Mariah and there's the idea of like moodiness with ballads and loving divas, and sort of like the internalized homophobia that fans have struggled with carrying in terms of their own fandom of her dance music remixes, all of that. And in talking about that, you bring in two really great characters that challenge your own assumptions of Mariah and challenge your own assumptions of your love of great divas and these songbirds of history, and that was someone on a listserv and a boy at camp. And can you talk to me about why those characters were put into this?
So I had almost forgotten these two characters, and those of you who have read the book will know what I'm talking about, but just to set up for those who haven't, I talk about, so I got internet, my family got internet in 96, 97, so I was 10, 11. And in those early wild digital years, I was, you know, quite adventurous, going on listservs and chat groups for diva lovers. I mean, I was like a 10-year-old Whitney Houston and Mariah fan, and that's what I wanted to search on like yahoo.com or whatever. And I ended up striking up a friendship with I never met the man, so I have no idea who was behind the screen, but I assumed that he was an older gay man who loved divas. And for what had to have been a year, we exchanged emails that were music criticism in a way. It was like my proto, like me as a nascent.
A much more endearing story than like most like listserv email. Like I heard someone like it's a very endearing.
No. There was not
one
there
of
was
those
not
like 90s
no,
listservs, right?
there was nothing racy or sus about it. It was like very extremely innocent. But so I would be writing about Mariah, Mary J. Blige, Toni Braxton. So weird. It was so strange. It was so strange. But and he would sort of nudge me in different ways to like listen closer, listen deeper. And that was in the absence of any kind of gay influence. Often, I mean, especially in that era and prior, you know, if you grew up gay and you knew it, as I did from a very young age, you didn't have mentors. You didn't have anyone in your life who was out. I mean, most people didn't. I did. So that was incredibly formative for me. And it was interesting that it wasn't about sexuality. I mean, I was so young. It was about culture. And it was about the queer ear. And in a way, I had access to that sensibility already, but he was almost a mentor to me in refining that ear. And then the other person you bring up is, I read about very briefly. It was a very last minute addition to the book because I'd forgotten about this person, but it was a teenage kid in summer camp who was a singer. And I've talked about earlier on this tour that this is really a book of a failed amateur singer, which I am. It's my readings or my listening to Mariah is very much suffused with the desire of someone who would love to be able to do that, but can't quite, or can, or has an aptitude for it, but can't reach the most transcendent heights that I long to reach. And this kid, I didn't know him well, but it was at a summer camp. And one day I came home, or came back to the dorm, and he was belting his face off. I don't know if it was a Mariah song, it was a diva song. And remembering that memory just made me think about queerness and talent, and how sometimes, you know, when you feel so alone in the closet or in your experience of gayness, almost like talent becomes like a shield. Like a don't fuck with me, I have something special. And I think Mariah's talent operates for her in a similar way. She's very open about the struggles and insecurities that she's faced her entire life. And I think that's a huge reason why queer audiences have gravitated to her, and she's become this icon, almost surpassing the other great divas of her time, like Whitney and Celine, to become like someone who speaks directly to the LGBT audience.
And And I want to spend some time, since this is the last scheduled stop, kind of talking about impact and legacy. And we had texted earlier today about there's a passage in the Brittany memoir where she spends maybe the most time other than Madonna talking about Mariah Carey and talking about how she refuses to call her anything but Mariah Carey and how much she was so starstruck by Mariah. And I mean, you just mentioned that in terms of Mariah having so much of this impact on artists. I think when it comes to it, you know, she really straddled such a great line between being sort of a very classic diva in so many senses of that kind of that Whitney and Aretha and all the people that she looked up to, but also being such a pop girl, you know, looking at the videos and you spent some time talking about the videos, especially the late 90s that she directed, where she is kind of embodying these characters in like the carnival and like all this like kind of very like proto Britney teen pop. I mean, tell me first a little bit about where you see that impact continuing and why you think that is that Mariah has continued to have such a been such an incredible force in terms of how pop has developed since, you know.
Well, I think her genre chameleon aspect, her ability to cross genres is huge here, because she's not just diva pop, she's also, in a way, she had a teen pop aspect to her too, with the Heartbreak, the Rainbow era. And she's not just that, but she's also deeply R&B. She comes out of the soul tradition of Aretha and Gladys and Chaka, and knows it deeply. She's also hip hop. She's also house. She's also gospel. So I think that allows her to move across many different demographics and generations. And for some people, that would be like just marketing or like audience maximalization. But for her, it comes from a genuine curiosity about music and sound and what her voice can do in different settings. She's also a songwriter, and so the sense of humor that we're talking about, the memeable aspect of Mimi, you got that? She's able to generate that through her own lyrical genius, which is quirky, wacky, weird sometimes, in a way that other divas before her didn't really have the power to do. So in terms of her influence, I think you see it obviously you see it in someone like Ariana Grande. I remember this video that went viral of Ariana. Oh no, I think it's still working.
Turn it off.
Turn it off.
Okay, try this one.
Sorry.
Let's try this one.
Hello. Okay. Oh, great. There was this video of Ariana stacking her vocals. Anyone remember that? I think it was like the positions, and she was like, roll it back. Then she'd do like an ad lib and then do a harmony. For those who don't know what vocal stacking is, it's sort of multi-track recording. The Beatles did it, the Beach Boys did it, Harry Nilsson did it back in the 60s and 70s, but it's combining multiple tracks of your own voice to create kind of a wall of sound. And Mariah, that's very distinctively Mariah. She loves background vocals. And when I was watching this video of Ariana do it, I was like, man, I wish we had video of Mariah doing that, because she really is the pop R&B queen who began doing all that intricate stuff of layering her voice in that way. And I think she continues to embody this ideal of what a voice can do at its extremes. I think there are many young singers who can do the runs, who have the range of a Mariah even. There are people who can do whistle notes now, but there's a passion that she brings to each performance. There's a go for broke kind of life or death, leave it all on the table thing about the way she sings that can't really be faked. can't be duplicated. And when I listen to Mariah now, I definitely do it in the context of knowing that so many young singers have learned their style through her, and yet, as magnificent as they sound, they're missing, maybe, not all of them, some of them are great, but it takes more than a beautiful voice and a virtuosic skill set to imprint your artistry in a fan's mind. And I think with Mariah, you don't just get a great voice and a great practitioner of singing, you get someone who has a very idiosyncratic worldview and a manner of songwriting that is rooted in her the specificity of her experience.
And also, I think such a refusal to be humble too.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it.
Yes.
Which she
Yes.
she should not be humble.
Yeah,
It's,
no.
it's just, that's not an indictment on her.
Yeah.
I think that's like an amazing thing, because as you point out towards the end of the book, there is still a lot of Mariah that's very underrated. There's still a lot of people who you know, discount her songwriting, or don't want to, you know, always give credit for all the things that she has invented in music and pop music and R&B, and sort of that success that she's had over the years, and so much that she's had to constantly fight against, you know, the having to have so many comebacks. You know, there's a quote from I think it was a New Year's Eve thing, where she was like, "Why do I have to have all these comebacks?" You know, it's like, why? Like, why do you have to keep doing this? And as you also pointed out, she has sort of in the last few years kind of been in a kind of legacy mode of sorts.
Yeah.
You know, to be seen if that's kind of where she likes to stay, or what we'll see in the future. But, you know, especially with the Queen of Christmas moniker that she's taken on, and you know, the fact that all I want for Christmas is you. All I want for Christmas is you. Yeah. I was like, why did I? That's really weird. It's kind of hard. You know, that sort of hitting #1 every year, and her just really leaning into it. I know we're about to. We're days away from her getting out of her. Tell me about what you see for the future of Mariah, and kind of the future of that legacy building. Will we continue to get more pop R&B albums from her? Will she, you know, continue to release new music, or does it seem like kind of settling into this the holiday mode with her is, and also kind of building that legacy? Is that sort of what the future looks like? What are you sort of envisioning?
I have felt kind of conflicted about the Queen of Christmas thing, as I think some lambs will agree with me, some may not, and that's fine. But when I really saw her leaning into this every year, I kind of didn't love it at first, just because I worried about her turning it into a caricature and turning into a seasonal caricature, when she's to me, she's so much more than Christmas. She's well, I was going to say she's bigger than Jesus. I'm sorry. We love Jesus. Let's have that conversation. But she, yeah, but I do love the Merry Christmas album from 1994. It actually, revisiting that, it has some of her most incredible singing, and some of her truest forays into gospel music. But I think, I guess, to get back to your question of legacy, she is so much more than that, and I do hope that as she continues to be in our ears through Christmas, that people will be inspired to listen deeper into the catalog. You know, this book is coming out at a time when the tides have turned for pop music of her kind. You know, she was reviled and just dragged through the mud by all the serious, mostly white guy critics of the time, because she was seen as superficial. People maybe didn't understand that she wrote her own music. They didn't understand the complexity of the sounds that she was putting together. And it was just a really raucous time. I mean, it was an anti-disco time too, which was inherently anti-Black, anti-gay. And so she was sort of living through and emerging in that moment where racism and homophobia were so pervasive in music criticism. But now, fast forward all these years later, she's topping Pitchfork's list of greatest songs of the 90s with the Fantasy remix. She was on Rolling Stone. She was number 5 on Rolling Stone's greatest singers list. So there's been a reappraisal. So it almost feels weird to be talking about Mariah as underrated when she is recognized legitimately as one of the architects of pop and R&B in her time. And yet I think what keeps the fans coming back is kind of the memory of almost having to hide our love for her because it was kind of dismissed or seen as uncool. And the battle scars of that stay with us. And also, I think, but we also stick around because she's still musically curious. Her latest album, Caution,
Amazing album.
is one of, it's in the top tier of her albums.
Yeah, and I liked Me, I Am Mariah, Elusive Sound too.
So
It was
good.
a very good album.
As I say in the book, I think her work in the past decade or so is some of the best that she's ever done, particularly as a songwriter. And what I love about Caution and Elusive Chanteuse, she does have an album called Me, I Am Mariah, the Elusive Chanteuse. We need to see the whole thing. Me, I Am Mariah, ... The
I was like hashtag beautiful. I was like, don't put the hashtag. This isn't gonna age well, but that song is so good.
It's so good. No, but what I love about those 2 albums is you hear her going where she wants to go and being adventurous still, working with Blood Orange, while also working with Slick Rick. It's the way she breaks down. She doesn't see the boundaries between generations, and maintains herself as at bottom. Her foundation is she's a lover of music. She's a fan. And the voraciousness of her ear and her musical appetites is still evident in her new work. And I think that really makes her special as an artist sort of in legacy mode. She's still hungry. And I mean, you see this in the rock greats like Bob Dylan too, who years later, even as the voice changes, even as the vibe maybe changes, but the primal need to express oneself through music and communicate through singing, through song. There are certain artists who live through music, and Mariah is one of them.
I think it's a good time to open up to some questions if anyone back there.
I'm still looking forward to reading this.
Oh, thank you so much.
And thank you for holding this event here. It's really important. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really loud. So I'm
Okay.
And on that note, I'm a recovering opera singer, and you alluded to opera early on. And
Yes.
I think about the Queen's Throat and the queer sort of fascination with maximalism.
Yes.
I think it's easy to say that Mariah is a lot.
Oh, yes. We heard.
So I'm curious what your take is. Why does queer culture embrace maximalism in art forms? And then the second question I have is just selfish. I don't know if you have an answer to this,
Go for it.
but how self-aware of her persona is she that she's giving us? Because like you, the Christmas stuff has sort of made me laugh, but also a little bit sad for her legacy.
Mhm.
How self-aware of her persona is she that because it's so easily digestible for people to make fun of it? How in on the joke is she? I think of people like Jennifer Coolidge and kids like that. Where she does things
That's a good
and then
analogy.
to the camera. Is that the same with Mariah, in your opinion, or if you could bring her here and she could answer herself?
I'll just bring out my phone.
Since she's behind the door.
Yeah. First question I love so much. I always want to be an opera queen, but I love opera, but I don't know it as well as I want to. But I do quote twice Wayne Kestenbaum's The Queen's Throat. Wait, you haven't read the book, but you quoted Queen's Throat? Oh, but you didn't know that I quote What?
No, but I just think about authors who reference opera. It's so stupid on its face, but we love it.
So this book is really one of the most influential on my book because it's just one of the best books on singing and gay men's relationship to a maximalist vocal style, whether that be opera. In this case, it's opera in the case of that book, but I think it applies to soul music, to gospel, to so many other maximalist vocal styles that really push the envelope in terms of what the physical instrument of the voice can do and where it can go. And there is a quote of Wayne Kestenbaum's from that book that is, and I don't know if I can do it right now, the operatic, I'm sorry, no, I have to find the right, it's, because it's so good. The grandiosity of operatic utterance is a wild compensation for the listener's silence. And that, I think, is the answer to your question about why do queer people, some of us, many of us, gravitate to this maximalism. I think because regardless of how early we came out, we've had to at some point live in a closet and be silent and not speak our truths, we've had muzzles on since childhood. And when we hear someone like that, who is not just able to express herself, but to do it with transcendent, sublime ability and completely unapologetically, authoritatively owning her own inner world and emotions, I think our ears gravitate to it. I mean, I don't want to be essentialist and generalizing, but my gay ear gravitated to it because I could hear in the pain of the voice and the transcendence of the voice, those two things together, a way out of what I was living. Your second question, how aware is she? I think she's very aware. She loves classic Hollywood. Her favorite star is Marilyn Monroe. I mean, I think she's worked with hyper campy artists like David LaChapelle. She knows what that's all about, and she knows how to engage in this campy world with a wink and with a defiant smile. And I think it is the give no fucks aspect of that, the high femme, defiantly high femme aspect of that is really like a middle finger to all the people who did not take her seriously as a woman back in the early 90s. I think.
In the ocean. But diamonds in the ocean.
Yeah. Hi. Okay. I don't think we need to pretend Glitter is some great movie. I don't think she would either. But what I say in the book, I drew on James Baldwin has a great book of film criticism called The Devil Finds Work. And in it, he says, we don't watch movie stars. We're not watching them act, we're watching them be. And that's sort of how I decided to go about watching that film. It's not a good film, but it is an interesting film in terms of how she wants us to see her and how she's trying to understand herself. It's a struggle story. It's kind of a Star is Born story, the making of a star and coming from humble roots as she did. Many people thought that she had grown up in privilege when in fact she had a very tough childhood, and she's trying to externalize that. And in in the kind of hesitations and awkwardness of her on-screen performance, which so contrasts with the virtuosity of the singing, which is such a fascinating tension in the film. You see the vulnerability there that kind of can't be faked. I talk about how amateur actors, there's something endearing about them because you can't learn how to be an amateur, and that's sort of how I feel about that film. I don't, and I don't mean that as shade. I really mean that as like, it's an important artifact in her career. And even, I think for someone whose star persona was built around perfection, there's something deeply valuable about a stumble and a blunder like that. And the album is fantastic. So,
Hi, Andrew. I'm Steve.
hi, Steve.
First of all, the book is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
The reason why I say that is you really touched on a lot of things that I felt. You talk a lot about the fact that you were drawing, particularly with the house music.
Yeah.
You were talking about, not really knowing what the experience would have been like when that music came out.
Yeah.
I'm a product of that.
Yeah.
I'm 63 years old.
Amazing.
Living in New York at the time, when all Daydream came out.
Yeah.
And that house stuff really hit, Dream Lover and on.
Yeah.
I've had a chance to meet with people like David Morales and
Wow.
sort of work with her and talk about some of the work we've done together.
Incredible.
But the great thing is that I love the book because really all the fields that you talk about, you were spot on. And it was so funny because as I was reading it as a critical lamb, I was thinking, okay, what is he gonna miss?
You were who I was afraid of.
And hitting every time I got to that point, it's like, oh, there it is, or he's got that. So you did a fantastic job on this book. So my question to you is, have you gotten this to Mariah's camp for anyone to get it to her for a read?
Well, Steve, thank you for the comment first. That means the world to me because, and I didn't get a chance to really talk about the house remixes, but they are so dear to my heart, and I really think they are some of the crown jewels of her body of work, and not sufficiently studied because singles and remixes were not the privileged format back in they still aren't really a privileged format of music criticism. The album was the format, and if you wanted a review, it had to be on the album. But some of her most adventurous and genius work was with David Morales and Colin Clavillis and these incredible house artists who brought an adventurous and almost experimental avant-garde side to her sensibility in the 90s. Your question about the team, I kind of am holding that at a distance because I think, I don't know, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think critic and artist need to be kind of at a distance, at least for me, because I don't know, and I don't long to meet her as much as I love her and as much as I owe my life to her in a way. I think maybe the way I think of myself as a critic is almost criticism is as much getting close, is as much holding at bay as it is getting close. And so to me, I that's part of the respect of the craft that I bring to it. So
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone.
We were talking about legacy, and this book is a part of
I love your shit.
What do you hope your legacy will be in this space?
Oh.
I know it's
Not to laugh at your question, but my legacy, Lord. I can only hope to. I said this in a previous talk that I think of writers who are great at writing about singers are few and far between, and that's I think part of it is because it's so hard to write about, and a lot of writers are not singers themselves. But I think of someone like Thulani Davis, who is one of the great and still not sufficiently well known liner notes writers. I remember when I was in high school, I got with my money, my allowance money, a box set of Aretha Franklin called Queen of Soul, the Atlantic recordings. It was 4 discs, and I was obsessed with that for years, my entire adolescence. And within that box set was an essay by Thulani Davis, and the way she wrote about the physical experience of listening to Aretha sing had such a profound impact on me. It changed the way I thought about singers and singing. And I think that's what great music criticism can do. Not just singing, but in different parts of the musical experience. And music is the aesthetic experience, be it music, dance, film, whatever. It is to me and to many, it is as important an experience as anything else that we experience in our lives, whether it's a love, death, friendship, what have you. Those, and you know, we live in such a difficult world. Life can be so painful, and sometimes that is literally, when I'm thinking back on my formative experiences with Mariah and other artists that I love, sometimes that is the only thing standing in between us and, you know, nothing. So criticism is the vehicle through which to, for me, is the vehicle through which to understand that experience. And so I guess I can't really think about a legacy, but my contribution, I hope, is something like that. Thank you for your question.
Well, Andrew, you are so brilliant. You are around, sign book, please buy a copy if you have it. If you already have one, buy a second copy, give it to someone for holiday.
For Christmas.
Yeah. And thank you all for coming here. Give it up one more time for Andrew.
Thank you. This was all have been amazing, and give it up to Asian American Writers Workshop and Diva.